Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're all keeping cool and hydrated and feeling good about whatever you got going on in your life. I'm so pleased to be back again this month. This topic today is we're going to just take it back to basics. I was telling Matthew last month when we did the inflammation discussion, I felt like my head was going to explode with the amount of info and long words, and it was just too much. So today we're going to bring it back a little bit. Some of this information you might be very familiar with, so it might be a bit of a refresher. Some things might be interesting to you because maybe you always thought it was something else and you get confused between some of the topics and the keywords. So we're going to go through macros, macronutrients, micronutrients, and food groups. Oh my, just like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. So our objectives for today, I always like to share a little bit about what I hope you take away from this to gain some knowledge about distinguishing between those items, macros and micros, and food groups as well. And then also I'll share with you some food sources too that can provide some of these essential nutrients to make sure that you can have, as we like to say, a very diverse and varied and balanced diet, and hopefully apply this information that you're taking away today to creating meal plans that work for you within your budget, your schedule, etc. Okay, moving along, our housekeeping items here. As always, you probably heard when you were entering into the webinar, our session is being recorded. You can use the chat box or the Q&A box at any time. I am going to pop in and out of slides every so often just to check if anybody is sharing anything. I love to make these interactive, even though I can't see you. So feel free, if I ask any questions, to throw into the chat some answers, or depending on if you are in a room with other people and you want to designate someone as the person who is moderating the discussion, then you can feel free to have conversation amongst yourselves. But we always carve out some time at the end of these webinars that we can have a proper formal Q&A if that is something that you want to wait for. That said, as always, right, I'm a dietitian, not your dietitian, so please make sure that you're taking away just general education and knowledge from what we're sharing with you today. Make sure that you are checking in with your own medical team and healthcare professionals to get their advice and clearance before you're starting or stopping any sort of food, nutrition modifications, anything with your medicine, regimens, treatment plans, etc. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me or might be meeting me for the first time, my name is Dina D'Alessandro. I have a Master of Science. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. Sometimes those words are interchangeable. And I'm also an adjunct lecturer up here in New York City in the Bronx at the Lehman College, which is actually where I went for my second degree undergrad, my master's degree, my internship. And so now I'm an adjunct lecturer. And I'm also the campus dietitian at the Student Health Center there. So I've done a bunch of stuff in the last 8 years when I switched careers to become a dietitian. And I'm really enjoying the good morning, Jessica, the various patient populations and people and age ranges that I get to hang out and work with. So thank you for having me. All right, let's go into this because I have some like show and tell things. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping my eye on the time so we have enough to talk about. We're going to start first with macronutrients. So if we just break down that word, macro, meaning large, these are large molecules that provide us in food form, that provide us with energy. Energy is another word for calories and other things that come along with it too, with nutritional value. So this is kind of what I call like the quantity of what we eat, because there is a caloric association to the food that we're eating. And we measure calories in the way that our body burns it. So when you think of like, oh, I'm burning calories by working out, but your body also burns calories just by doing things like this, like moving your hands around or breathing or having your heart beat. So this is kind of like putting gas in your car, right? You want to know how much energy, how much fuel you need to be sure that you are taking in the appropriate amount to keep that car of yours, that engine of yours running throughout the day. And our macronutrients are categorized into three things: carbohydrates, protein, and fats. We sometimes know this also as lipids. The first thing, carbohydrates. Now, I just want to caveat this by saying all foods have some sort of each one of these three macronutrients in them in some sort of ratio. So if we make sure that we do have a balance and a variety of things, then you should be hitting about what you need in each one of these categories. But Usually what happens, people tend to focus more on the grain-based or starchy foods in correlation to carbohydrates. And you're not wrong. As far as the ratio goes, these are definitely foods that are higher in carbohydrates, breads, rice, pasta, anything that's white or could be a whole grain too, or anything, like I said, might be a starchy food. So as an example, right, we have some bread sliced here, carbohydrates as a macronutrient, it provides us with an immediate source of energy. So when we eat these, our body uses it very, very quickly. This is why, perfect timing with the Olympics going on right now, this is why people will carbo load before a long race or a marathon, because our body takes it in and it's an immediate source of energy. This is also why sometimes if you have a very carb dense meal, you're going to be hungry pretty soon after it because your body can digest and metabolize carbohydrates within about 2 hours. So by the time you chew and swallow and it goes down into your gut system and off into the direction of your cells and your blood, etc., that's where it kind of makes you feel hungry again. So about 2 hours or so it takes for us to metabolize carbohydrates. So as you can see here in front of us, this little circle I have, there are in the case of nutrition, we do metric measurements. So in the case of carbohydrates, there are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. And because carbohydrates are this immediate source of energy, a lot of our cellular functions rely on them. We do tend to recommend that the majority of our food throughout the day come from it. But like I said, we can kind of combine our foods. It doesn't always just have to be starchy, grain-based foods that carry carbs. But over the course of our day, we aim for about 45 to 65% of our calories to come from carbohydrates. This is usually, unfortunately, the first thing that comes out of people's diet when they get a little nervous, especially if they're managing a chronic condition like diabetes. And just a quick side note, in November, we're going to go in more depth into carbohydrates and diabetes in there. Also, there's a lot of fear based around carbs. And listen, as an Italian person, you will pry pasta from my cold, dead hands, my friends, because I'm contractually obligated to eat regular bowls of pasta. So I will never say carbs are bad for you, but I can understand, especially if you might be a little less active than you were. Sometimes carbohydrates are not being utilized as efficiently, so some people tend to shy away from them. So let's take this as an example, bread, right? We have a slice of bread that's about 80 calories per serving or per slice. And again, that ratio, so it has carbs and fats and proteins in it. It has about 12 grams of carbohydrates per slice, about 4 grams of protein, and about 1 gram of fat. So when you add all of that up, it comes out to about 80 calories per slice, but the majority of the macronutrient in a slice of bread is going to come from carbohydrates. Okay, moving on to our protein sources. Uh, Mostly animal products are considered protein dense, protein rich, but we also have plant-based foods as well. It's not listed here, but there's beans and legumes, and also tofu or soy-based products are also considered high protein foods. But just like I said with carbs, a lot of foods have protein in different ratios. But the go-tos are usually what you see on here, some of these animal based items like meat and fish and milk and eggs. So here, again, as an example, we're using eggs as an example for some of the information I have here. But the thing I want you to know about protein, especially as we age, over the age of about 35 or so, our body just naturally kind of stops making new bone and muscle mass starts slowing down a little bit or becomes decreased. So it's very important for us to remember to include a variety of protein-based foods in our diet because it helps us maintain that muscle mass. That in turn helps us protect our bones, and then it also helps repair any damaged cells that might be happening. So if you're undergoing surgery, chemotherapy, or even if you're working out a lot, it helps repair any of the tears that naturally occur in your muscles when you've been lifting weights or doing resistance training. So here we have an example of the source of protein. So we have an egg, and egg, so protein is clocking in at 4 calories per gram. And because we need it for muscle repair, it's actually not we don't need a ton of it. A little bit goes a long way. So it depends on the person of how much you need. So you can see that range of in the course of our day, we usually range about 10 to 35% of our calories should come from protein. That should usually keep you satisfied as far as what your body needs. But also, protein takes a little bit longer than carbohydrates to digest. So you actually feel a little bit fuller as you're adding in more protein in your meals. So here's an example with the egg. like I said before, right? All foods have a little bit or some sort of ratio of these macronutrients. So the eggs have 6 grams of protein. That's usually in the egg white. 4 grams of fat that comes directly from the egg yolk, and then negligible amounts of carbohydrates. There's like barely even 1 gram of carbohydrates. So if we add that up, that comes out to about 72-ish grams, 72-ish calories per egg. And we're going to talk about calories in a second as well. Okay, next up we have fats, also known as lipids. We saw some of this discussion around fats in our conversation, I think in February, when we did the heart health and cholesterol discussion. So here we resurface again, example of high fat foods, things that are usually going to be animal based, but we can find fats in something like coconut oil as well. So high fat foods would be things like oil, butter, even nuts and avocado have are a good source of fat. Not always a saturated fat, not something that is going to be putting you at risk for heart disease, but more health supportive. And then things like cheese as well. And here, fats or lipids are used in a variety of different ways too. So they help insulate us. They protect our organs. They provide some insulation in between our skin, muscle, bones. They are a source of energy as well. So, like I was saying before with the carbohydrates, carbohydrates are going to be used first as a source of energy. Fat is used second. Your body is not going to steal protein from you unless it absolutely needs to, in which case then that is sort of detrimental. We don't want you losing protein from your body, but fat is okay. Your body can make other things in replace the fat cells that might have been taken away if you need to use those as sources of energy. And they also are part of what are known as the phospholipid layers in our cell membranes. So now here, we're not fat shaming, but fats have more than twice as many calories per gram than carbohydrates and proteins. They clock in at 9 calories per gram. And because they really do a lot of decent work in our body, and they also, like protein, help us keep fuller longer, they help with satiating us, satisfying us. We usually recommend that our daily caloric intake consists of about 20 to 35% of fat containing foods. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about how certain things contain a little bit of everything in that sense. But as an example, something like a tablespoon of olive oil. A tablespoon of olive oil is going to be pretty much 100% fat. So that's about 13-ish grams of fat, 0 grams of protein, 0 grams of carbohydrates. So this is one of those foods that doesn't have all three things in it. And if you do the math, it's about 120 calories worth of food. So we're adding these things up, right? You have the bread, you have the eggs, or maybe you have cheese, you have some oil, maybe there's a salad involved. Over the course of the day, you're going to have a variety of different macronutrients, and they're going to equal, hopefully, the amount of calories that you need in your diet. And we'll see that here. I'm going to purposely put this in here just to give you as much of a headache as this gives me. So my friends, back in the day, before the internet was invented and we had online calculators, those of us dietitians who work in a more clinical setting where we're really trying to help people stay alive or recover from surgery or injuries or any sort of condition that lands somebody in a hospital, we would have to do a whole calculation based on their biological sex, based on their age, based on their activity level or stress factors. So if they're recovering from a surgery, we would have a certain number that we have to include in that calculation in there. And also physical activity if they're quite sedentary or if they're very, very active. So you can see these crazy numbers. My students hate me when I make them do these longhand because they know they can shortcut everything these days online. But the point is that a lot of this is based on research, taking into account all this criteria to share with you what your individual needs are as far as calories in the course of the day. So if we use that analogy, like I said before, we're thinking of putting the quantity, right? The macronutrients are the gas that you're filling your tank with. Well, I mean, Do you overfill your tank when you stop at a gas station? Do you put too little and start running out before you get to your destination? No, of course not. You know how many gallons your tank might need, and you know how much you might need to go from point A to point B. And maybe you stop along the way at different gas stations when you're taking a very long road trip. Same thing with your body. Your body is a machine, it's an engine, it needs to be fueled. So on the bottom, and I think we did this a couple of months ago, I gave you the same kind of shortcut. If you're not sure of what your body needs as far as calories are concerned, you don't have to do all this crazy four-part calculations going on up here. You can just do a really quick estimate. And sometimes this is interesting to just know. A lot of people I work with don't eat enough or don't eat enough of the right things. So it's nice to make sure that you're at least getting the amount of calories or fuel in your body that you need over the course of the day. So a ballpark estimate is about 25 to 35 calories per kilogram of body weight. And that converts into about 13 to 15 calories per pound if you don't feel like using the metric system. So if you feel like doing that right now, or if you have one of those apps and you want to check against that, that's totally fine. I always try to also just make a note, don't obsess too much over these things. It's just nice to have some data that you might want to collect to see if you're hitting the amount of things that you need over the course of your day, your week, etc. And then you can correct on things that might be missing from your meals, from your diet, when you look back and take a look at this data that you've been collecting. All right, so now we're going to switch into micronutrients. And honestly, I think I'm going to make a whole webinar maybe next year. We'll do a whole webinar just on micros because I could go very, very deep into this. And I don't know if we have the time to cover all of that today. Micronutrients. Okay, we had macros, large molecules, calorie dense. That's the quantity of your food. Micronutrients is what I kind of refer to as the quality of your food. Much smaller molecules. Your body does not need a lot. So we saw in carbs and fats and proteins, we used grams as a unit of measurement. Here for micros, we use things like milligrams or even micrograms. That's how little our body needs of certain things. But there's so many vitamins and minerals, those are the two categories of micronutrients within our food sources. Now, unlike the macros, there is not a similar ratio of everything in any one type of food. All foods contain some portion of vitamins and some portion of minerals. And here too is why we keep encouraging variety in your diet, because you mix and match and combine things, and hopefully you create a complete set of what your body needs, these essential nutrients for your body. Micronutrients contain no calories, so vitamins and minerals are zero calories. And if we suffer from deficiencies from these things, then it can set off a chain of events as far as different pathways that our body cells use to function properly, or it could cause a condition to flare up or not be managed well. So think of things like iron deficient anemia. By the way, minerals, if you remember, that comes from the periodic table. So there's about 103 of those out there. And we'll see in a second what some of the more essential ones that our body needs. But think about iron deficient anemia, or if you've been deficient in vitamin D, that's a big one, especially in the Northeast. So those little things can cause disruption. And if we do have some more severe types of deficiencies, then that can put you at a much greater risk of malnutrition or other conditions that spread across different organs and systems throughout the body. So let's go through. The good news is, like I said, everything contains a little bit of everything. So the more you mix and match, the more ideal, balanced, varied, diverse your diet is, the better your odds are of getting exactly what you need from everything. So we have things like deeply colored fruits and vegetables. We also have different kind of animal products as well. Those grain-based foods that are in the carbohydrate section, they also have a lot of good quality minerals and vitamins and minerals in them too. So if you take a look at this little plate that I have here, right, that broccoli contains things like vitamin K, which is great for blood coagulation, and it helps build up our immune system in our lower gut. Oranges, I think that's an orange, vitamin C. That helps us with collagen, and it also helps with a variety of other cellular functions as well. Top right, the beans, they contain phosphorus that helps with a lot of things as well, as far as like building mineral and also helping with bone density. Bottom right, we have some sliced steak. So that has things like iron, richness in it. So again, that's helping with blood cells and making sure we're not being, and we don't get anemia as well, in addition to a variety of other things. So here, the reason why I think this is important to know is because if you have a dietary preference, a dietary preference, or something that you need to completely avoid or remove from your diet, or you're allergic to something, or your doctors or dietitians have told you to limit or avoid a particular food because maybe it interacts with your medicine, or you might have a condition like kidney disease where you have to be more mindful about the types of vitamins and minerals that are in those foods because they could exacerbate your condition. There's a little bit of everything for everybody. Maybe you follow an all vegetarian or vegan diet, you can still get a wide variety of other plant-based foods to help counteract whatever it is that you have to remove from your diet. So as a dietitian, that's kind of what I do. I look and assess to see, what are you eating, but what are you not eating? And is there anything that I can help you add to your meals to make sure that you're getting the quantity and the quality that we just talked about? So in this next slide here, I'm going to just give you some more definitions of things within the vitamins umbrella. We have vitamins that are fat soluble, which means that they use fat either through our body or as a transport from food that carries through and helps them get to where they need to go in our body. Those are vitamins A, D, E, and K. And then we have water soluble vitamins. Those are the B vitamins and vitamin C. They use water as a transport to get to where they need to go in our system. Usually the fat soluble vitamins are things that if you end up not knowing, if you're getting them in food form, it's fine. But if you end up supplementing and you're not sure of the dosage, those can become toxic at certain levels. Your body cannot necessarily excrete excess forms of fat soluble vitamins in pill form. In water soluble vitamins, usually if you're taking too much of something, like you're taking excess vitamin C because you're suffering from a cold, or somebody told you to take a B complex vitamin and you're taking a multi-dose or a mega dose of that, you can usually excrete that out through, you could pee it out, you can through your urine. But it's always safe to make sure, number one, that you check with your medical providers to make sure, are you deficient in anything before you take these supplements? And that also reminds me, we'll probably do just a whole supplement discussion in another webinar. And if you are taking supplements or vitamins and minerals in pill form, that you make sure you're following the proper dosage that's on the bottle, because sometimes too much of something is not good in this case. So I said to you before with the minerals, if you look at the periodic chart, the elements, there's like about 103 on there. These that you see on screen here, calcium, phosphorus, etc., those are what are known as the more essential ones. Without these, our body cannot function. So sometimes our body can make some of these things through different pathways and processes in our systems already. And some of these things we have to take in from food. So just out of curiosity, if you feel like putting in the chat, I feel like a lot of us recognize already things like calcium and sodium. Iron probably is a big one too. We talked about iodine when we did the thyroid discussion, I think back in January of this year. Does anybody know what molybdenum might be, or where you might get manganese from, or chromium? So if you want to talk amongst yourselves, what are some of the minerals that seem a little curious to you that you've never heard of before, or things that you know a little bit more about? You can add that to the chat or throw that just out there in your discussions with each other. As you're doing that, I'm going to go through my list because I can't remember all these in my head. So I made a little note for myself. So something, okay, so calcium, we already know. Those are things like, dairy products and so on. But we also have calcium in leafy green foods like kale and spinach and broccoli, and also things like nuts and seeds like almonds and sesame seeds that carries calcium in that too. I mentioned phosphorus. We have that in things like beans and legumes. Potassium really is all the plant-based foods have a good source of potassium in it. Sodium will usually come from table salt, but it's also in other salty type of foods. And sodium is also in things like celery. So just by nature, some of our fruits and vegetables already carry that in that. Chloride can be found in things like seaweed, tomatoes, olives, different types of meat, and Also, chloride is part of technically table salt. So table salt is sodium chloride. NaCl is how you write that out in element form and mineral form. So sodium chloride is technically what you eat when you're taking in table salt. Okay, let me see if I can pick another one. Magnesium. Magnesium is in dark chocolate. Yum. Avocados contain a decent amount of magnesium. Nuts, legumes, whole grains, and spinach. So as I'm saying these words to you, as I'm giving you these food sources, right? Because it doesn't help me if I say to you, hey, you need more phosphorus in your diet. And you're like, what does that mean? So if I give you food sources, now start thinking of how you might prepare things or what might be missing from your diet that you might want to add in so that you know you're getting the proper amount of minerals in your daily meals. Zinc. Let's try zinc. Zinc. Does anybody know where zinc is found? If you feel like you want to put that in the chat or chat about it wherever you might be, feel free to do so. We can find zinc in things like oysters, so the shellfish, the crustaceans, oysters, crab, lobster. We can also find zinc in things like beef and pork and eggs. We can also find zinc in things like pumpkin seeds and oats. So again, whether you eat animals or plants or a little bit of everything, or you can't eat certain things, but you can eat other stuff, there should be something out there that you could include in your diet that would give you this mineral profile. Let's see, chromium. Chromium can be found in things like beef and turkey and broccoli. Copper can be found in organ meats. I don't think I've had an organ meat in a very long time. Back in the day, I used to have, well, I used to be force-fed liver. That's kind of come off my meal plan these days. I'm not a fan, but if I don't want to do that, I could easily do nuts, seeds, whole grains, and shellfish. I do shellfish, so that's my source of copper there. Let's see, fluoride. Okay, so fluoride, a lot of us will think of fluoride as in it's already in the water system, and that is correct. But fluoride can also be found in brewed black tea and coffee. It can also be found specifically in things like canned shellfish, like blue crab. It's also found in small amounts in oatmeal, raisins, and potatoes. So, right, who knew? I mean, still brush your teeth because dental health is very important, oral health is very important, but you can also get fluoride from food-based sources as well. Molybdenum. Have you ever given 2 seconds of thought about this mineral? I have not. But molybdenum can be found in things like legumes. So those are our lentils, our beans, our chickpeas, black-eyed peas, lima beans, whole grains, rice, nuts, potatoes, bananas, leafy greens. Listen, this thing is really popular. It's coming up in a lot of things, even dairy products like milk and yogurt and cheese and beef and chicken and eggs. So quite the variety of things here. So this is why I think if you consider vitamin and mineral sources and deficiencies in them, I'm always going to say what's missing from your true diet, right? Before we start taking pills to supplement something, because supplements are only going to act as in addition to, make sure we're covering the bases. So if we have a mix of all of these different foods that I'm reading off here, you should be doing okay. All right, I still want to add a couple more things. So manganese, manganese is another one too that people don't necessarily recognize or know. That can be found in whole grains, again, clams, oysters, mussels, also nuts, soybeans, legumes, rice, leafy vegetables, coffee, tea, and this can also be found in spices like black pepper. And if you remember from last week, last month rather, when we did the inflammation discussion, we talked about capsaicin, which is that chemical substance in pepper that helps with anti-inflammatory properties. Selenium, I'll tell you, you take 2 Brazil nuts a day and you got your daily dose of selenium right there. That's the easiest way to do it. Also found in other seeds, cottage cheese, and chicken. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the bases. And like I said, I think at some point I might actually go through and just pull out the mineral or the supplement discussion as a whole separate webinar, because I definitely want to share with you a little bit more about quantity of things in our daily diet. But I think for today, that feels like enough to kind of go over of what the vitamins and minerals, the combinations of foods, the variety of different things that you can get, that if you have this balance, this diversity, a little bit of everything on your plate, every other day you kind of mix things up a little bit, especially if you enjoy mixing up and combining different foods, you should be covered. You should be doing okay with your vitamin and minerals discussion. I want to have a couple of honorable mentions here. And this especially will come in, we'll talk a little bit more about this in, like I said, November when we talk about managing diabetes. I want to give an honorable mention to fiber. Fiber is technically part of our carbohydrate family, but depending on the type of fiber, it's usually indigestible. It usually goes in one end and out the other. So there's not any calories in it, or sometimes there's like 2 calories per gram, not 4 calories per gram per the carbohydrate family. But you can find examples of high fiber foods, as you can see here. Whole grains, again, anything that has that bran or that covering around them. Also, any fruit or vegetable that you eat with a skin on it. So instead of peeling your potatoes or peeling your apples, the fiber is found in that skin around your food. So that's adding a little bit more fiber to your diet too. And then, of course, this is all just plant-based foods. There's no fiber in animal-based foods. Even avocado. Avocado is naturally high in healthy fats, but it's actually a really good source of fiber as well. I usually say if you can get about 3 grams to 5 grams of fiber per food item, and you reach about 25 to 35 grams of fiber at the end of the day, then you're in luck. And I'll explain a little bit more about how to get there in one of the coming slides. So here we have fiber helps us with reducing the risk of so many of our conditions because it slows down the digestion. It also acts as either a scrubber sponge or a Brillo pad. That's the analogy that I tend to use with fiber that helps us with removing some of the excess cholesterol and again, helping us with managing our blood pressure and any of the functions that are going on with digestion as well. When we increase our fiber intake, though, we also want to make sure we're adding water to our diet. Otherwise, you're going to be sadly upset about how constipated you're going to be. So make sure when you increase fiber intake, you always increase water. And that's, by the way, if you're taking a fiber supplement or using like Metamucil or something like that in your daily water glass, make sure you're using enough water in there. So I'm purposely showing you food sources of water, right? We all know water comes from bottles or tap or whatever. We could totally get it like that. But you can also find water density in certain foods. About 25% of our overall water intake, recommended water intake, usually can come from a variety of foods. So we have in the food itself a very water dense nature, like things in cucumbers and like, when you crack open or you try to cut open a piece of lettuce or a cucumber, you kind of get that spray of water coming out. But we also talk about water that's added to meals too. So soups and stews, as you're stirring that around, that counts towards your water consumption. Let me take a look here. Do multivitamins cover all of those really mentioned elements and minerals? I'm going to always say yes, but, or it depends. So if you're already getting what you need, taking a multivitamin could just at least maybe make up for what might be missing. But if we don't necessarily know exactly what we're deficient in, it could be a waste of money in that sense, because your body should be getting what it needs first through food. Then the backup plan is the supplements, and that's usually with the doctor's recommendation. I tend to say, if you're not getting everything with food and you're only relying on a multivitamin or you're taking like excess amounts of iron pills or vitamin D or whatever without knowing if you are deficient in it, then we don't really know, like that's not necessarily going to be the way that your body is going to want to receive that. It would rather have it in the whole food form. It can't hurt to take a multivitamin just in case. But yeah, usually I tend to tell people you might be wasting your money depending on how much you have set aside for things like that. So it does cover a variety of those things. So thank you for asking that. It's usually more heavy on the B vitamins, but it has a little bit of everything. So thank you for that question. Okay, moving on to water here. The reason why we need water or fluids in our diet every day is because it helps with so many different things. Our body does a bunch of chemical reactions every single day over the course of 24 hours. It can make water too, right? Like we excrete that through urine or sweat, but we also require water as an essential nutrient. So water is not part of the macros or the micros. There's no calories in water in its form like this. So this is something, again, I just want to do like an honorable mention that it is still part of an essential nutrient that our body requires, but it's not part of the two main groups that I shared earlier. It also helps with creating energy formation or transformation, turning things into what we need. It also helps us, like I said, excreting of waste and helping us with temperature regulation by helping us sweat. If you are super active or on days like we've been having recently where the weather is just unbearably hot and humid, please make sure that you're getting enough water in your system. Even if you don't love just plain bottled or tap water, try to stay hydrated in some other way through infused drinks or cool teas, cold teas, or like I said, anything that you're adding water into or adding in those water dense fruits and vegetables to your diet to make sure that you're staying hydrated. All right, we're going to move into our food group discussion. How am I doing on time? I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. We're going to move into our food group discussion. Way back, a handful of decades ago, this used to be known as the food pyramid, which was a little bit confusing to everybody. But now the powers that be from the US government, the United States Department of Agriculture, and the Food and Drug Administration created the dietary guidelines for Americans. And within these programs, we also created something called My Plate. So instead of the food pyramid, it's now called My Plate. So it depicts an image that looks familiar to all of us. I mean, not everybody eats exactly like this with those ratios on our plate. Not everybody also has a glass of milk on the side of their meals, but it just gives you a general understanding of food groups to help you design a meal plan. So here's, I think, sometimes where the confusion comes in, because we just got done talking about macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins. Okay, well, the only thing I see on here says protein. Where's the fats and where's the carbs? Well, like I mentioned with the examples I was giving earlier, everything has a little bit of everything. But for some reason, the powers that be decided to segment out and just put protein in as its own food group. And again, sharing the ratios of things. So me as a dietitian, the way that I use this graphic, this image here to share with the people with whom I work, I tend to cover up the top and I say, let's just focus on the bottom for a second. Odds are, if you're basing as many of your meals as possible in vegetables and protein, then you'll be getting a good variety of things that you need from your diet, because protein can come from a bunch of different sources, animals and plants, and vegetables, especially those deeply colored ones or those cruciferous ones that we were talking about, or, I mean, botanically speaking, it's technically a fruit, but if you throw an avocado in the vegetables section, that can give you a good source of fiber. It can give you a good source of healthy fat. So you're going to get a little bit of everything if you definitely base your meals around veggies and protein. Then I remove my hand and I reveal the top part of this image. If you want to add fruits, if you want to add grains, if you want to add dairy, those would be secondary things. So as long as you have the bottom two covered, then the other ones are kind of like playing sideshow to it. Also, because not everybody loves fruit, or people tend to be a little bit more fruit heavy and not as vegetable heavy as I would like to see. Also, grains tend to also be somewhat, either, like I said before, somewhat vilified, where people are afraid to eat them, or people tend to focus a lot on grain-based foods because grains are also economical, right? You can afford a bag of rice or a bag of lentils versus a piece of meat or even like eggs, especially nowadays with some of the prices that we've been seeing. So it makes sense that sometimes people go more towards the things that they can afford. On the right, uh, for younger people, yes, okay, I would probably promote dairy as a really good source of calcium. But as we age, a lot of us become quite lactose intolerant. A lot of us have dairy intolerances. A lot of us just don't like the taste of milk as a drink. So what I share sometimes with my patients, my clients, and also my students who I teach is I sometimes say to them, listen, why show you words when I can show you pictures? So I actually like this version of the My Plate. Side note, this is from Canada. Canada does things a little bit better than us in a lot of things. But here you can see right now the visual representation, they've actually folded in the dairy into their protein section. And that's probably what I would recommend too, because I would rather not have to like make you feel encouraged or feeling like you must have to have a glass of milk at every meal. Not everybody's going to want to do that or has to do that. I would rather you focus on water or other fluids and fold in the dairy consumption into the area of protein. And you can see here, I mean, if you can't really make them out, there's pieces of tofu, there's a salmon in there, there's beans and chickpeas. There's also some different kinds of ancient things like quinoa. Quinoa is technically always lumped in, like on the top right there, it's lumped in as a grain, but it's a really good source of protein as well. So you can get a variety of different foods that can qualify as protein sources. On the top right is where you have your grain-based foods. So again, those are your rice, your breads, your pastas. You can see a variety of different colors as well. We do encourage, when you can, to do the whole grain version for more fiber. It does help with slowing down the digestion system and alleviating or reducing the risk of any chronic conditions, but you don't always have to have whole grain foods. Some recipes I think are better with white rice versus brown rice, totally your preference. And on the left-hand side, they combined both the fruits and the vegetables. So here is where I would probably say I might have split that up a little bit, and I might have made a larger ratio with the deeply colored veggies first, and then a smaller ratio with the fruits on the top. So as you're looking towards these things, again, take a look at what's in your diet these days. Where do you tend to focus on? Are you always making sure the veggies and the proteins are represented first before you add stuff in? And again, with the side note of, it's not 100% all the time of everything perfect, perfect, perfect. But as you've maybe heard me say in previous webinars, I tend to do like an 80-20 split, right? 80% of my day, my meals, my week are pretty spot on with the things that I want to make sure are prioritized in that. And that also includes other lifestyle habits too, like sleep and stress and things like physical activity. And then 10 to 20% of my meals, my week, etc. Whatever. It's fun, it's flexibility, it's cereal for dinner or whatever I feel like having. So what I would like for us to do now, that we have some of this information together, it's let's go through and look at some examples of meals that are made and give me your thoughts about this. If you want to chat, put things in the chat, or if you want to if you want to add in, what you think might be missing from one of the meals that I'm going to share with you. So we have I'll give us about like 9 minutes or so to go through some of the slides and take a look. Before I do that, Donna asks, what is the best vegetarian food for iron absorption? So Donna, this is a great example of things that should be paired up. So in the case of the plant-based world, we have iron-rich foods. So if you're not eating meat, then you're not getting your iron from an animal form. You're getting your iron from things like your leafy green vegetables, like salads and lettuces and kale and things like that. Those are usually quite high. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, like all of those cruciferous vegetables are usually quite high in iron, but really any vegetable source is going to also meet that as long as you have a variety there. However, there's a little trick to this because our body doesn't necessarily automatically absorb or pull out the iron from the cellular walls of the plant. So what we do is we add vitamin C rich foods to it. So I'm actually going to put this in the chat. If you think of a vitamin C rich food, right? Vitamin C rich foods. A lot of us think, like I showed before, a citrus fruit, and yes, that's correct. Also, any fruit really. Strawberries are kind of next on the list, and also bell peppers, gram for gram, bell peppers actually are higher in vitamin C amounts than even an orange is. So it actually goes bell pepper, then a strawberry, and then an orange. So as an example, if you're doing something like a spinach salad and you enjoy the flavor combination, you could slice up some strawberries or do like a strawberry vinaigrette. Or if you're having a side dish of broccoli, you can squeeze some lemon on top of that, and that will help draw the iron out. Or if you enjoy bell peppers, for me, I don't love raw peppers, so I probably cook them first because they repeat on me a little bit. But you can add bell peppers to one of your leafy green types of dishes or a salad or, side dish or whatever, and that will help extract that. So I hope that answers your question. That's a great question, by the way. A lot of people worry about how do I get it, and they end up doing iron supplements, which are sometimes they cause constipation. So I would be, careful with making sure you're getting enough water and fluid if you are taking iron supplements for that reason. So thank you for that question. All right, so let's take a look at some things that I found online, but also some of these pictures came from my own meals. This is a great example of just a purely vegetarian meal. So if you can't make out what's on screen here, because some of it's a little bit blurry, up at the forefront here, we have cubed tofu. To the left in clockwise form, we have quinoa. We actually have some herbs there. I don't know exactly what those herbs are, but some herbs. We have some broccoli in the back, all the way in the back. It looks like some iceberg or maybe even like Boston or Bibb lettuce. And then around the clock on the right, it looks like either red leaf or radicchio or maybe beets on the side there. Then we have sliced avocado with some sprinkling of seeds. And then towards the forefront here, we have sliced, it looks like yams or sweet potatoes. In the middle, we have some sliced up mushrooms, and we also have some cashews there. So think about macros first. Are proteins and fats and carbohydrates represented here? If you want to throw that in the chat, give me a yes or no, what you think, or talk amongst yourselves. And if you think something's missing, what is it and what would you add? Because a lot of times I think people who do follow more of a vegetarian or vegan diet often get asked, where do you get your protein from? And I'm like, my friend, protein is in a lot of things, don't you worry. But we saw before some of the examples where we have carbs and fats and proteins. So I can give you some information right now, right? So cashews, high in healthy fat, tofu, high in plant-based protein, avocado, high in fiber, and also high in healthy fat. We have the broccoli. Again, these other things would be more carb or starchy, dense foods. So those are more carbohydrates, but there are protein in those things as well. Quinoa on the front side here on the left is actually a complete protein. It actually has enough of the combinations of what we need to have protein as a chicken breast. So if you don't eat things like meat or chicken, a cup of quinoa would be fine. But take into consideration, it also comes with carbohydrates where a chicken breast would not have many, if any, carbohydrates in it. Also, the variety of colors show me that we have vitamin K, we have a bunch of B vitamins going on there, we have omega-3 fatty acids, these the orange versions of foods that carries vitamin A. So it looks to me like you have a really good amount. And off to the left there, that's almonds. So that almonds and broccoli have calcium in them. So we have a really good variety of foods that cover both the quantity and the quality that I was talking about before. Okay, here, this is just a simple plate of hummus. Hummus is just ground up chickpeas or garbanzo beans, usually with some garlic in it, usually with some olive oil in it. You see on the side there, we have the citrus, the lemon, right? So as I was saying before, if you have something like a vegetable-based dish, you might want to add some vitamin C to it to help extract some whatever iron might be in it. We also have some herbs and spices on top of that too. The forgotten heroes of a lot of our meals. I think we forget how good some of the herbs and spices not just help lift the profile of the flavors, but also bring in some of those vitamins and minerals we mentioned before. Then to the back there, we have some fluffy pita. So all of this is quite carb dense because it's all vegetables or plant-based foods and grain-based foods here too, but you have protein sources coming from the garbanzo beans, and that drizzle of olive oil is your fat, or at least it's probably even healthy fat too. So you got your macronutrients taken care of, and some of your micronutrients are represented in here too. Okay, this is a breakfast that I made. I made this a long time ago. I actually miss making French toast. So this is just 3 slices of whole wheat bread with an egg batter, right? Dipped in an egg batter with some cinnamon in it. If you remember, again, with the inflammation discussion, we had some of that conversation around cinnamon's anti-inflammatory properties. We have crushed up, chopped up walnuts. We have strawberries, and then of course maple syrup because duh, right? Hello, it's French toast. Okay, so let's take a look at this too, right? Macronutrients are covered. You got your carbs from the bread and your fruits. You got your protein because I used egg in here for my batter. You have your fats coming from your nuts, and also maybe, if I used butter instead of olive oil, or even an olive oil too, to cook whatever this in, then that would cover my fat sources. So again, I might not be having everything meet the exact amount of the ratio that I want in one meal, but over the course of my day, things are definitely adding up, especially when you start seeing more of those colorful fruits and vegetables show up. Again, a great example of something quite simple, easy, convenient, grab and go. Mexican food is probably one of the best types of cuisines I can recommend, and usually often quite affordable too. So you have your carbs represented here with the tortillas. And sometimes if they're corn, that's also a whole grain, so bonus on your fiber intake. On the left-hand side, I believe that's grilled fish, and on the right-hand side, that's carnitas, which is like a pulled pork. So we have the protein. What might be missing from here, maybe I would probably add like a slice of avocado in there because that would help with the healthy fat. So that would give me a full, well-rounded base of macronutrients on that. Okay, let's see what else is on here. This is another one of my meals. This is a mixed green salad with some sliced up peaches, and I have some white cannellini beans. What else do I have? I have olives in there. I have I can't see. I think there's probably some nuts in the back there somewhere, but I could be mistaken. So again, we have leafy greens, vegetables, fruits. Those are all carbs. We also have protein coming from the beans. We have some healthy fats through the dressing that I made, and also the olives carry some good quality healthy fats in there too. So there you go. My macros are covered. So that doesn't have any fish or meat or anything like that in it. Totally fine if that's the way we're going. Again, just another example. I hope you're kind of getting the gist of it at this point, right? Mix and match your foods. If you don't do it exactly in a bowl or a plate, that's totally fine. We also have something like this. Open up just a basic minestrone or vegetable soup, slice of toast with a little slab of butter on it. Those are your macronutrients. Those are your micronutrients. So allow yourself some creativity in the meals that you're making. Maybe you've gotten some inspiration from some of the things that I'm showing you on here too. Culturally sensitive as well, right? We have things that people eat as traditional foods, so they might not eat in that kind of like plate formation. Maybe they do more like a bowl or a chutney or a chowder or a curry dish instead, or a stir fry instead, and any form that you enjoy, like something like this. Yes, there's protein in all of these vegetable foods, but I probably would throw in some, if it's vegetarian, I might throw in some tofu, or if somebody doesn't mind an animal product, I might throw in some sliced beef or chicken in this to add a little bit more protein to this. Okay, so this is my new thing now. You probably caught on, right? At the end of every one of our webinars, I like to just offer up to you some consideration. What are some things that you're taking away from our conversation today? What are some things that you're learning? What do you want to start doing if you feel like you haven't done something before and this maybe inspired you to pick up a new habit? What's something that you want to commit to? What do you want to keep doing? If you're like, girl, I'm already doing all these things, then that's great for you. Continue doing that. Enjoy the flavors, enjoy making yourselves new recipes, enjoy experimenting with different cuisines. And then on the right-hand side, what's something that you might want to stop doing? So this could be, I want to stop not having enough water in my daily intake, or I want to stop adding different things to my meals and maybe substitute them with something else.